Personally, I think the unconquered south face is the only one worth scaling. It's a 20,000-foot sheer wall of ice, but that's never stopped me before. Risk? Of course I'm aware of the risks. Thank you for your concern.
So let's say if you can get past all the ice on the ocean and make it to the wall, then you have to find a way to get up the 200-foot wall. Okay? Now let's say you can get past all that. Then what you have is an ice desert that just goes on and on forever, filled with mountainy terrain and temperatures that are 150 degrees below zero. Now, if you can somehow make it past all that, you might find the firmament. Now, as you can see, it's really, really simple how they pull it off, making you believe that Antarctica is a continent when it's not. That's why it's called the Antarctic Circle, because it's an ice wall, a circled ice wall all the way around the whole world. And I've had a lot of people say, well, I've had friends that worked there and they didn't see any ice wall, or were stationed there actually. And I'm sure they were stationed there, but they were only stationed in those two little bitty areas that I just showed you. And that's also the only two little areas that you could take a tour to. And the rest of, and I say this in quote when I say Antarctica, is restricted, off limits to the public, to anybody. And that's due to the 1958 Antarctic Treaty. That's because they have something to hide. They know if you went anywhere other than those two spots, you would realize that you're on an ice wall. And even a lot of flat earthers, a lot of my friends of mine always wondered, well, how do they pull it off? How do they How do people not know? And that's exactly how, the way that I just showed you. If the ice wall circles our entire flat plain, how can the elites possibly monitor every mile of the perimeter to keep anyone from getting access? Well, Jeff, and everybody else who's asking, that's really, really simple. I'm going to explain it to you guys really, really quick, okay? Check this out. Now, what you have to understand is this is a naval ice patrol ship. It's also an icebreaker. It can get through places no other ship can go, and even if it tried, it would be crushed into a million pieces, okay? This ship is designed to cut through the ice and come and find you. It has a sensor on it. You also have buoys on the ocean that have been there for a long time. I think maybe even all the way back to maybe World War II. But anyways, check this out. Even if you can go under the radar of the Navy, they have these buoys that set off signals that will notify that icebreaker, and he will come and capture you quicker than anybody else can get there. That's his job. That's what that ship's made to do. It can break through that ice and find you very, very quickly. There are not any other Navy battleships that can do that. We got some tough battleships, but only a few ships hide behind this ice and wait for you to get there. You can research this yourself. There are several sites, but for instance, right here, National Data Buoy Center. Now, if you'll scroll down a little bit, it gives you a map there with the red and yellow showing you where some of the buoys are, stations with recent data, stations with no data the last 8 hours. So yes, there are buoys stationed all over the ocean that transmits data. But anyways, check this out. Even if you can go under the radar of the Navy, they have these buoys that set off signals that will notify the Navy of your exact location. Here is a Google diagram of how it works. Just simple towers. The buoys are like towers on the ocean because the ocean is flat. So they send a signal to each one. And as soon as that signal goes off, when the waves get just a little bit rough, they know exactly where you are. And if you've ever seen a Navy radar, you would know that. Look at it. It's a flat, round disc. Shows the whole Earth. Like I said, the buoys are like towers. They give off a signal, people. So no matter where you are on that ocean, they know exactly where you are. Now, let's say you can make it past this territorial boundary of the 60th parallel. Also remembering that you can only make this trip 3 months out of the year before the ice fields start closing in. So let's say you can make it that far and somehow get close to the 80th parallel, which is where the Royal Navy icebreaker will be on guard and patrolling. And now, let's just say you can get past that bad boy. If you do, then you have about 5 or 6 foot of ice that's frozen on top of the ocean water that you have to break through.
The ice makes it impossible for ships to reach any of the bases for about 8 months of the year. We can only get through between November and March. That's summer down here. After that, the power of the ice is so great, even a modern ship would be crushed if it was trapped in it.
So, like I was saying, this Royal Navy icebreaker ship is designed to cut through this ice and come find you. And it is also an icebreaker, which means it can go places that no other vessels can go. Now, the only way that this Royal Navy ship is going to come looking for you in the ice is if you make it past 60th parallel. And at the 60th parallel, you will be turned around by just your average Navy warship. Whether it's China, America, Russia, whatever country you are close to, when you get to the 60th parallel, that country's Navy is going to send a cruiser or a warship out to turn you around. They are the first line of defense. The final line of defense is this Royal Navy ship right here.
On a so-called globe, this right here would be the 80th parallel south, which is basically the whole coast of what you have been taught to believe as the Antarctica. And this is where the Royal Navy icebreaker ship will track you down. Now, let's have a look at the 80th parallel on a flat Earth map. Imagine that. The Antarctica turns into an ice wall. And look at that. The 80th parallel is the perimeter of the ice wall, which the Royal Navy icebreaker protects. Now what you are looking at here are the logos of the 5 government agencies that control our so-called globe, our so-called spinning ball. Now before we identify the logos, let's have a look at this map that hangs on my living room wall. And this map is the Gleason World Map from 1892, number 6 from the Boston Public Library. Okay, and as you can see here, it was published in the Buffalo Electrotype Engraving Company in New York. All right, and as you can see here, it's scientifically and practically correct as it is. Okay, now back to the logos. Here we have the International Maritime Organization, which basically controls our waterways, all of our waterways, how far out we can go into the ocean, territorial boundaries. Okay, so now let's have a deep look into their logo. Now, isn't it awful funny that the people who control how far we can go out in the water have a flat Earth map with an ice wall as their logo? Okay, anyways, here we go. The International Civil Aviation Organization. Now, this is the government agency that controls our airways, how far we can fly and where we can fly. And once you fly out too far south, they're going to turn you around. But anyways, let's check out their logo. Okay, as you can see here, hidden in their logo, the agency that controls our airways has the flat Earth map with the ice wall around it, hidden right in it. Okay, now here we have the World Meteorological Organization, which basically they control all the mainstream media information we get about storms, hurricanes, and all that good stuff. So, anyways, let's check out what's hidden in their logo. The flat Earth map. Okay, now here we have the World Health Organization. Now this organization controls all the mainstream media news that we hear about, like COVID-19, Ebola, or any other kind of pandemics going on in the world. But let's have a look at what's hidden in their logo. And as you can see here, the flat Earth map with the ice wall around it. Okay, now last but not least, we have the United Nations, which basically control everything, control all the militaries in the world, all of the treaties that are signed in the world. These people control this. And I think it's awful funny that if you look in their flag, they have the flat Earth map in their flag. And if you go into their General Assembly hall where they hold all their meetings and sign all their treaties, guess what's on the wall right up above them? The flat Earth map. Now this all could be just coincidence, but I don't think so. If you look at any map before 1958, it shows a flat Earth with an ice wall around it. And all the government agencies that control our airways and our waterways have the flat Earth map with the ice wall in their logo. Okay? Now, if you were to try to get in a private plane or on a private boat and try to get too far south to try to find this ice wall, here's what's going to happen. The Navy's going to show up in a battleship or a jet fighter and turn you around and escort you out of the area. Now, let's watch and see what happens when a private boat or a private jet gets too far south. 80 degrees south, that is. Now, these guys are nowhere near the ice wall, but here's what happens when you get too far south.
It's a Navy destroyer. He will yield. He'd be thinking, that cheeky better not cross my bow. Yeah. Stop, Josh. They take it seriously. What did they say? You got to yield. You can't just fucking. But they think you're going to charge them.
No, for sure. If that's instantly something. No, they did. They come back last call. Yeah, fucking talk to them.
Actually going around. He's turning. Stop. He's turning. He is actually turning.
He said we have to shoot yesterday.
No, he is turning. Fucking hell, what have we done now? It's turning, Josh. Just sit still.
He's slowed down.
Yeah, he's really slowed down. No doubt we're in trouble.
What for?
It's coming to us.
He's coming to us.
He's got the shits because.
Channel 16, over. 16.
Yeah, I got you, mate. Just bad boys.
Come back. You gotta get channel 16. No.
You are in a maritime exclusion area. Please record your intentions.
Who the fuck's that?
We're heading to the shelf to go.
Just over here, we're out fishing, heading out fishing. Oh, we're sitting out fishing.
He's out, boys.
We're going that way.
We're just traversing. Is there a helicopter coming at us?
Are we landing? I don't know. What
Just travel, just go.
Just go.
He's seen out the chopper.
That's a drone. Is it?
That's unreal.
We set up a demo today with this Cessna and the Air National Guard. I'm going to be inside of this Cessna and we're going to be going rogue. We're going to fly into that no-fly zone and we're going to see how the Air National Guard does it. They scramble the fighter jets to come
Take off. We're off.
flying for miles and miles until
Okay, we've just entered the no-fly zone now.
our pilots aren't talking to air traffic control, ignoring their calls to reach them. That triggers an alarm at the Air National Guard base. These fighter pilots scrambling to their jets. They're on alert and ready to take action 24 hours a day. Today, racing to their F-16s, suiting up, climbing on board, and rushing to the runway. Taking off to intercept our rogue Cessna. Reaching the target in just minutes. This is the view from the F-16. That's my Cessna right there.
Intimidating as you would think it would be. Look at that fighter jet. He's right off our wing.
Another F-16 swooping in on the right, calling us on aviation frequencies.
You have been intercepted. If you hear this transmission, acknowledge the radio call and rock your wing.
He wants us to identify ourselves. We're a rogue aircraft, remember, for this demonstration, so we're not going to respond at all and see what this
You
fighter
are
jet.
ordered to turn to the northwest.
The fighter jet giving us one last warning. After all of this, the pilots still won't listen. The plane won't leave the airspace. Will you shoot them down?
If required, we'll execute the rules of engagement per the commander of the North American Aerospace Defense Command. And yes, we would do that.
Shoot the plane down.
If it meets the rules of engagement, yes, we would, to defend the airspace.
Entering restricted airspace. You are ordered to turn west immediately. If you do not follow these instructions, you may be fired upon.
Now, just in case you're not awake yet, the reason these government agencies have the flat earth in their logo is because they know where we live. And they get paid to protect that edge.
An octopus would stand out very easily there if you couldn't use your camouflage, use your skin to change color and texture. Here's some algae in the foreground and an octopus Isn't that amazing? Now Roger spooked him, so he took off, the cloud of ink, lands, and when he lands, the octopus says, okay, I've been seen, best thing to do is get as big as I can get. That big brown makes his eye spot very big. So he's bluffing. Let's do it backwards. I thought he was joking when he first showed it, except I thought it was all graphics. So here it is in reverse. Watch the skin color, watch the skin texture. Just an amazing animal. Can change color and texture to match the surroundings. Watch him blend right into this algae. 1, 2, 3.
Aliens have been living at Earth for many years, and this is the footage that proves it. They are sending a camera down to 1,700 m below sea level because their fishing radar was picking up savage readings. They did not know that when they reached the bottom, their lives would be changed forever. Out of the darkness of the horrifying depths, a real-life alien reveals itself. This jaw-dropping footage now tells mankind where these rogue aliens are hiding. The fisherman knew by just looking at it. It was plotting to take over the world. By the orange color, we can tell it's an extremely poisonous mammal. The fisherman mysteriously missed supper that night. The tentacled alien followed the boat home, and is thought to be living amongst humans on land. Orange eyes equals alien.
Good evening, everyone. I have a special video for you guys today, and this video is going to show you how they hide the ice wall from the tourists who actually take a tour to supposedly Antarctica. And there's only 2 tour routes from 2 different countries, and you're going to be amazed. Once I went to the original flat earth map from 1892, it was easy to figure out how they do it. I'm going to show you guys. Enjoy the video.
Okay, here we have the flight and cruise route for a tour to Antarctica from Planet Janet Travels. Let me zoom in on that a little better where you guys can see it. There we go. Okay. Now, let's switch over to this map of the route so you can see the names. It leaves out of Cape Horn, goes past the South Shetland Islands, along the Antarctic tail, and then back up. Now this right here would be the South Shetland Islands on Google Maps. And then of course, there's the little tail of Antarctica. There's a panned out view for you guys to see it a little better. But pay attention to the tail of that Antarctica. It's going to be really important in a minute. Here's another view of the route. See how it goes along the edge of that tail, and then they turn around and they go back. Okay, now here's where things get interesting. Let's look at the 1892 flat Earth map. Now, this right here is South America. So let's zoom in here where you guys can see this. Now here's the route. There's Cape Horn, where they leave from. And as you can see right down below that, you have the South Shetland Islands. Okay, then you have the ice wall, of course. But notice this little tail right here. Well, that's the same tail that you see on the continent Antarctica that they show you on the globe, which is pretty slick. But anyways, this little part right here, this is the little area that they travel along and call it the Antarctica, which is only a tiny little bit. So the route goes this way. It goes through the Shetland Islands, comes down through here, past these little islands, then turns around and goes back to Cape Horn. And if you'll notice on this map how the ice wall looks, well, down here where they supposedly tour at, this is the only part of the little ice wall that sticks out in that area. So you'd be stationed there working, or take a tour and you would never really see the ice wall. You only see that little piece of it that sticks out, because of the rest of Antarctica is off limits. Now let's have a look at the only other tour that you can take to Antarctica, which goes from South New Zealand and back to Tasmania. Now notice, I want you to pay attention to that little Stewart Island there as you leave New Zealand. Notice they go down here to what they call Commonwealth Bay, and then they cruise along a little bit, turn around and go back to Tasmania. Okay, now let's have a look at that route on the flat Earth map. Here we have South New Zealand, and notice right there on the other side of it, you see that little Stewart Island that I was telling you guys to look at on the Google map. Okay, so the route leaves here, goes down here, which on this flat Earth map it says Disappointment Bay. Remember on the Google Earth map it says Commonwealth Bay, and then they go back, return to Tasmania. So anyways, like I said, they leave here, go along this little bitty tiny bulge that sticks out from the ice wall called Commonwealth Bay, Disappointment Bay, whatever. Notice it's the only part in the ice wall except for the other part that I showed you that bulges out away from the ice wall. So anyways, they go down through here, cruise along a little bit, and then return back to Tasmania. That way you never see the ice wall. You only see that little bulge of it that's sticking out there out of this whole map. Most of this wall is cut out perfectly all the way around except for those two little spots. And they both bulge out, and then they're at the exact same spot at the bottom of both of those countries, just like it shows you on Google Maps.
The hidden lands beyond the ice walls. Awakening truth. Let's have a little journey to the old map. this is just a glimpse of the known lands and the near lands. Did you know that there are other worlds and more lands to explore?
Are the inhabitants of the Draco lands, northwest of the known lands, which are here, crossing the lands of Venus, up here. These beings that once visited our lands are known for their great technological advance in weapons for attack and defense as well as great psychic development. Some of their beings can communicate telepathically, using this technique to subdue any colonizing enemy, or even to colonize other lands. The enemies, by means of a treaty, achieved a union with the custodians, but at the beginning of this was not so. But the custodians attacked their lands when they were not in their most advanced stage, but on the contrary. The Draco lands lack islands, but 2 large continents are found with great vegetation. In fact, the most exotic plants of any other circle environment within the Great Dome exist there. Its Great Wall of Ice was never an impediment to be able to cross other domes and conquer some lands. These walls were left by the custodians when they decided to put an end to the total manipulation of their environment. Did they stop manipulating them? Well, we really wonder. We think not. They started by lands outside the domes, like their nearby land Osiris. But they then moved their technology to islands of Anubis. Many of these beings stayed in these paradise islands, but they used there many of the military bases for weapons development. What happened in the ancient battle between Edemeans and the custodians? The custodians finally won at the beginning, since the Edemeans, as well as we mentioned, had not achieved the progress they have today. But it was not easy, nor did they surrender. Since they knew their lands well and are experts in making large tunnels, the custodians had to use advanced technology to finally achieve victory in those lands and leave their mark on the walls of ice surrounding the dome in that circle environment. The Draco lands were also visited by other races, such as the Anunnaki and inhabitants of other nearby lands, such as the famous Greys, the inhabitant of the Orion lands. All right, so I have to find Orion, but there's the Anunnaki right here. There's the lands of Orion. That's where the little Greys come from, is right here. So that's just what the book says, but I thought I'd tell you all a little bit about it. Do you believe in aliens? Do you believe in outer space? How do you define outer space? Is it an infinite vacuum of nothingness? Or is outer space just mean more land beyond the known lands? How far do you think it's possible for a being to travel? Has Star Wars and the Space Odyssey and Spaceballs convinced you that we can go light speed? Or maybe, just maybe, they aren't so far away. And maybe someday we'll be able to prove it. Oh, and by the way, as far as this map goes and the Gleason's map, the Earth is round, just not how you've been taught. And if you do believe in light speed and warp speed, I've got a question for you. How do they avoid obstacles traveling at those speeds? How do they not get hit by something? You believe in wormholes? Do you believe in time travel? Then you're more of a kook than I am. Because my beliefs involve common sense. Okay, so when people continually ask me to show them the edge, how? Because right inside this one little ice ring right here is the known lands, okay? Outside that, you've got the Ancestral Republic, which is right here. I'm sure you've heard of them if you've read The Navigator That Crossed the Ice Wall. But when someone like Elon Musk says he wants to go to Mars, land of Mars, right here, human colony, okay? So let me show you a little bit of something. Let me show you something. Lands of the Anunnaki, right here. That's one of our controllers. You see how close they are to us? How easy it would be to reach us? And here's another one. The lands of the custodians. They're pretty close too. But I'm saying I'd guesstimate that at maybe 60, 70,000 miles. A lot easier to fly that distance than to come from outer space, right? But let's look around here. We got lands of Neptune. Here's the planets, right? Lands of Neptune. Lands of Venus. Lands of Saturn. Lands of Jupiter. And inside lands of Jupiter, you got the lands of Zeus. So now we start getting into some mythology here. Pegasus. Lands of Hercules. Cassiopeia. Even a galaxy. Look at there. Andromeda. Right? But if you look at the edge of this map, it's cut off. So this plane is much, much, much larger than this. There's supposedly 178 domes. This isn't hardly any of them. You know, this is just a small portion of that. But what makes more sense to you? That the aliens come from outer space, way out in an endless vacuum, or they just come from like here, or like here, and just fly there? They can just fly to us. Think about that next time you ask someone to show you the edge.
Okay, you guys remember how I showed you the maps that were here on Earth before 1958, before the governments took them out? Now I'm going to show you the Encyclopedia Britannicas in the public libraries before 1958. Here's volume 2 out of the alphabet A. And we're going to flip to the Antarctica, and this is from 1958, as you can see. Now, we're going to flip to the Antarctica and see what the Encyclopedia Britannica from 1958, before the Antarctic Treaty, says is there. Now, you won't find this in the new encyclopedias because the government's banned them. But what I want you to notice right here is, notice how it says the flights proved inland areas to be featureless in character, with a dome 13,000 feet high at about latitude 80 degrees south, longitude 90 degrees east. Take a really close look at that. Now I'm going to zoom it in for you. When they returned to New Zealand, these flights proved the inland areas to be featureless in character, with a dome 13,000 feet high at about latitude 80 degrees south, longitude 90 degrees east. Now, if this doesn't make sense to you, let me show you with an image of what a flat earth map would look like. Now, this is what a latitude 80 degrees south would look like on a flat earth map. As you can see, the dome comes down closer to you over the wall, which will be about 13,000 feet. Now, if you go back out into the center of the earth, or up the North Pole, and try to go up to the firmament with a little bit of calculation, it's going to show that it's about 385,500 feet away. It's really simple, folks. Now, if you're not familiar with any of this at all, and you're just now new to all this, you could say, well, this guy is crazy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But what you got to ask yourself is, why do all the maps before 1958 show a flat earth with the ice wall around it and a firmament, a dome? And why does the encyclopedia tell you that there's a dome there, and it gives you the exact height at a certain latitude and longitude? Well, the reason is because in 1958, that's when all governments and all nations of the world signed the UN treaty to ban all civilians from going to the Antarctica, and NASA came in and erased everything, just like they're erasing everything today. So again, ask yourself, if all this existed before 1958, why doesn't it exist now? How come it all of a sudden was erased and just disappeared out of your history books, out of your encyclopedias, out of your libraries? Wake up, people. Wake up.
We're moving as well. Yeah, it is. What's moving? The iceberg. The big iceberg moved. It's moved from the blue crag all the way across.
I scared him, I think. Nothing to 3 foot starting. Maybe
Depth in here 190 meters, 600 feet.
What the depth?
The depth.
How'd they measure that so fast?
Probably with sonar.
I don't believe in.
Off the front of the bow.
I don't believe in that witchcraft.
You're like, that's witchcraft.
Send someone down and tell me it's 600 feet.
Quick, get the man, the suit, the hose. I want proof. Take the measuring tape.
You hold this
600
straight.
feet.
You hold this straight. And I'll hold the other end.
Maybe it's styrofoam.
Yeah, it's a big cutout.
kind of look for, poke around and look for some old, seldom talked about hollow earth entrances. And of course, all the caves and all the access points have been dynamited or welded shut, and everything was pretty locked down.
I want to come back and talk to you about Antarctica and all the heads of state that are going there, and we're like, what's going on down there? We got to find out.
So he gets to Antarctica, and long story short, they discover there in Antarctica. Now this is in 1998, right? They discover there's bases under the ice.
But then they found that there was this huge magnetic anomaly down there. But the magnetic anomaly is consistent with basically a 50-mile wide city, a metropolis down there.
Wow. Of course, he teaches in the public school system, so if he started talking about this, from what I found out from a geometry teacher friend of mine, that you can lose your job over this one.
We'll assume it's U.S. military, but we don't know for sure. But satellites over Antarctica discovered something under the ice, and it was a huge something. It was gigantic. We still don't know what it is. They still won't discuss it. It causes magnetic disturbances.
The first territorial incursion committed by the Nazi Party in 1939, their takeover of Norwegian sovereign territory at the northern tip of Antarctica. But why? What were the Nazis looking for?
I get an order from the Pentagon to report to the Chief of Research and Development. I walked into General Trudeau's office, then he gave me an order. He said, Phil, watch things for me, the rest don't understand.
The fallen angels being locked away beneath the ice in Antarctica. There's not very many people that go to Antarctica. For some reason, that's just the land that nobody touches.
Why would he, at the age of 86, go to the Antarctic? It had to be something monumental. It had to be something that's really something that would change everything.
Sometimes we use robots in the plants. Some of the plants we have are 50 or 60 acres under roof. We have a section of the plant we call recon, which is recontainerization. Stuff comes in from the train or comes in on a...
We turned into like a journey to the center of the earth type thing, where there was actual physical entrance at the North Pole, and he went inside it and saw this, the land that time forgot.
If you want to know how many residents it has as its population, the official count is an average of only 5,000 temporary residents. That's all the scientific community that...
Military bases, alien bases, there's a laboratory there, there's, an entire situation going on of contact between this human race and an alien race. And then, of course,
the Congressional Committee went down there, and that's when rumors began about this Antarctica city having been discovered. The city was a city that was flash frozen around the time of the Great Flood.
It's covered by a molten glass dome. There are waters above that dome. The Earth is, a disc, not a ball.
In the Earth's magnetic field so far out that it can be sensed out 300 miles away from the planet. This unknown thing, spaceship or something, otherworldly that would be found in Antarctica.
As this saga continues to unfold, I am gradually becoming more convinced that the early Nazi success in Antarctica provided the impetus for everything else that was to come.
And we had 3,000 officers in R&D. And that was the order he gave me. Watch things because the rest don't understand for me. We knew they were important, and we knew there was something there. Return them to us for competitive edge of the Army and give them to the people.
The Ark of Gabriel was taken. Russia took the Ark of Gabriel to Antarctica. If these fallen angels are released from their prison,
so he goes down there, and what does he see? He sees exactly what these people are saying that they have found. He sees the mothership. You don't see the other two because they're buried under the ice. But one they dug down to, they're 2 miles down in the ice.
And we have to sequence that, put it in order of color. And sometimes we use robots or we use self-driving carts because they don't have eyes like we have eyes. This is all driven by military research.
There was a huge expanse of land, bigger than the United States, past the South Pole, which he hadn't even seen yet. which meant that nobody's seen it because he was the leading explorer in the world at that point, and he flew his own planes.
The personnel there is just incredibly small as far as how many people are there. These pyramids that have been uncovered at Antarctica, and that are larger than the pyramids of Giza.
Out of this underground base in Antarctica, this huge hole begins to open up. This spacious, huge, UFO spacecraft comes up out of the ice, from under the ice.
So Antarctica is not millions of years old in terms of it being covered by ice over a period of millions of years. There were cities, or basically metropolises down in Antarctica. It was...
Well, NASA says it's not, space agency says it's not, the government says it's not, and we've been told all this stuff, but, it just comes down to our own eyes and what we can prove.
When we find out that there's this large magnetic anomaly under the ice that is not part of the continent itself. In other words, there's something sitting on the Antarctic continent that's underneath the ice that is still able to throw out a magnetic field disturbance 300 miles out.
The coming of transhumanist robots, chemical human hybrids, and artificial intelligence. Without the Dorsum Antarctica's success in 1939, World War II might never have happened.
The integrated circuit turned into a supercomputer in 30 years. We were a little bit worried about that, like I told the general. What are we unleashing on the world, General? We don't know what this thing will end up. What if it integrates with the brain?
In the end times, these fallen angels are probably pretty angry since they've been trapped. They're trapped in Antarctica. They're probably pretty angry that they've been trapped for so long.
He sees that. He realizes that these are aliens. It was aliens who helped us advance. It were alien beings that were coming down from the sky in these wheels that the Bible talks about.
Humans have 120 degrees of peripheral vision, and we can run as fast as 25 miles an hour at an oblique angle to that moving object and catch it midair in a glove.
The entire Antarctic continent was made out of resource-rich materials, and nations could be squabbling over this thing for years and years to come. You can ignore a lot of stuff, but you can't ignore conspiracies that are bigger than money.
Now, one thing that Lima and Google Earth have in common, is that both systems show blur-outs, whiteouts, and grayscale alterations of certain areas.
And moves up into the air and flies away.
From George's Bank to open water, it is torture here in the middle of the ocean. Look, check out this water. And then in a second it's just going to be glassy clear. What the heck? This is crazy. What did we just go through here? That's insane. Yeah. This is so weird. Over there.
North end, there's like no depth.
What? What? But I mean, that's like just a different world over there. What? was that?
You have got to take photos of that.
Among the signatories of the treaty were 7 countries: Argentina, Australia, Chile, France, New Zealand, Norway, and the United Kingdom. The treaty entered into force in 1961 and has since been acceded to by many other nations. The total number of parties to the treaty is now 56. It is exactly because of the Antarctic Treaty that any attempt of an expedition without permission is considered illegal and will result in a fine or a prison sentence. This is contrary to the held beliefs of Admiral Byrd and the hosts of the Longhini's Chronoscope 1950s TV show, as Antarctica would not be for everyone, only those with influence and power. The only possibility for members of the public to explore Antarctica since the treaty's inception is to purchase a ticket for the expensive journey, usually via cruise ship, in which you sail to the outermost regions allowed for commercial vessels, and, perhaps if you have more wealth to spend, a half-day outing on an exposed beach via a tender. For a once-in-a-lifetime trip, you merely glimpse its form, never mind its entirety. Returning to the treaty, one of the major components in its creation and organization was the United Nations. The United Nations, commonly referred to as the UN, is an international organization founded in 1945, following the end of World War II, with the primary goal of promoting peace, security, cooperation, and development among member states.
I'm looking at this image and I'm thinking, it looks like a door. A big steel door into the earth in the Antarctic.
There have been dozens of bases established in the Antarctic, which have since been abandoned. Is this one of which there is no official record?
The Germans had 3 expeditions to Antarctica. The third was the one in 1938-39, which was run under the aegis of Hermann Göring. They were looking for a spot on the Antarctic coast where they could build their own base.
Nobody knows for sure why the Nazis wanted an Antarctic base, and if they built one, there's no record of it.
You really could not find a better place to hide than Antarctica. It is at the end of the earth. No one is going to chase you there.
Building a base in the Antarctic poses huge logistical challenges.
Operation High Jump, August 26, 1946. Admiral Richard E. Byrd is ordered by President Truman to lead a military expedition into Antarctica. Operation High Jump included 4,700 men, 1,300 ships, 33 aircraft, and the world's first weaponized nuclear submarine. The mission: destroy any threat to the will of the United States military. Oops, bad idea. Admiral Byrd is met by 5 dish-shaped objects that decimated his military force in under 3 minutes.
He was a man of action, but he was a man of thought as well. An explorer and a scientist, an adventurer and a philosopher, a complete man. One of the men in history who had to lead the way.
Yes, there is. And not up around the North Pole, because it's getting crowded up there now, because they find out it's really usable, not only to live in, but militarily. But strangely enough, there's left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole, on the other side of the South Pole, from Middle America. And I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.
That's a tremendous
So
challenge.
there's a lot of adventure left down at the bottom of the world.
Admiral, do you hope to see that?
I do. Finally open the pack so that we could break our way into more open sea. We had added nearly 500,000 square miles to the Pacific Ocean. And here is our journey's end. At length we sighted that great natural phenomenon, the ice barrier.
leaked footage from 1969 of our flat Earth from the Apollo 11. You can see land beyond the ice wall. This is proof.
And now at last we're going to find out what was in the southern part of this mysterious part of the world. For after battling the bad weather, here we are 240 miles within it. We came to this strange phenomenon, ice islands. This was a strange and weird sea. Steaming through these ice islands was an eerie sensation. Here was the twilight of the gods, and we were curious to know what these somber giants were guarding.
At the beginning of 1947, this was New York. Yet another expedition by the American explorer Richard Byrd arrived on Antarctic shores. It was a very strange expedition. Unlike his previous three, this one was completely financed by the US Navy. Operation High Jump. Now, this report comes from all Russian Navy scientists, etc., telling the story of what happened during the years throughout the Third Reich and the exploration of the Antarctic. Under the command of Admiral Byrd, there was a powerful military squadron. An aircraft carrier, 12 surface ships, 1 submarine, more than 20 airplanes and helicopters, and about 5,000 people on staff. A strange team for a scientific expedition. December the 2nd, 1946, before the start of his expedition, Admiral Byrd at a press conference said, "My expedition is military in nature." At the end of January 1947, full-scale aerial reconnaissance began surveying the Antarctic region of Queen Maud Land. Now, quoting from Acts 17:24, "God that made the world and all things therein, seeing that he is Lord of heaven and earth, dwelleth not in temples made with hands." The German people were very Jesus-loving people. In one statement, Hitler said, "You cannot be a German and Christian, as God is within the German people," a reference to his understanding the Christian churches had been usurped by the Jewish Talmud. He required a Germany that was focused on the present. The mind of the German, he said, had to be focused on the here and now, on the earth. And he was so right. In Isaiah 63, quoting, "And I will tread down the people in mine anger, and make them drunk in my fury, and I will bring down their strength to the earth." Now, the strength of mankind, of course, is their mind. So the Lord himself is saying, "I will bring it back down to the earth, out of the heavenly realm, where people are so focused, back to earth to get things done." This is Hitler, he was dedicated to Jesus in the true meaning of Jesus dying on the cross at the hand of the demonic who had by then dominated the Western Christian world. He believed the ancient gigantic monuments were angelic built, and as such wanted to discover the secrets of creation and build the 1,000-year reign of Christ. His noble efforts were rewarded by the discoveries the Germans had uncovered. The German people was and are the chosen race, and is why the Allies burned alive 25 million civilians in firebombing even today. Anything suggesting this is immediately removed by the Zionists, the devil in the so-called Christian world. When he took back Austria, he immediately obtained the spear allegedly used to pierce the heart of Jesus and actively searched for the legendary Holy Grail. The Holy Grail means holy blood genetically and associated with divine wisdom. He saw this as being the holy blood of Germany, and armed with these holy ideals was allowed by the angels, the watchers, to enter their domain of Antarctica. With an analysis of ancient knowledge brought incredible results. This was the belief. For the Grail Cup isn't just a symbol of ancient knowledge, but also a centuries-old moral code. In Antarctic, Germany was shown wonders by the angels. The Germans described it as paradise on earth. As the war drew to an end, the Americans were able to seize the secret documents of advanced technology which mystified the Allies. Likewise, Russia seized documents, and they, like the Americans, rounded up as many German scientists they could find. But most of the top scientists had escaped. 100 submarines were unaccounted for, and where did they flee to? Antarctica. How many trips did they make until they vanished? The angels informed them the souls who died in Germany would reincarnate as saints after his second coming, and Christ would liberate Germany from the Zionists and introduce the plans of Hitler. They had to await the Christ, reborn on January the 11th, 1944 in Australia. Now, Americans, this is a Russian man speaking, have always been interested in the techno-magical legacy of Germany. Suddenly the inexplicable occurs. The expedition, designed to last 6 months, is quickly aborted after 2 months, leaving the Antarctic coast deserted. It was an actual retreat. The real facts, reliable evidence and sensational phenomenon in the film. It all went to plan in the first weeks. Tens of thousands of photos were taken. Suddenly, the inexplicable happened. The 6-month expedition terminated after only 2 months, fleeing the Antarctica coast. It was a real fast retreat. They lost a destroyer, almost half their carrier-based aircraft, dozens of sailors and officers. To commission investigation, members of the US Congress, Admiral Byrd said the following, quote, "In the event of another war, America can be attacked by an enemy that has the ability to fly from pole to pole with incredible speed." What made the Americans flee? In 1945, 18 months before Admiral Byrd's expedition began, 2 German submarines entered Mar del Plata, port in Argentina, surrendering to authorities. These were no ordinary submarines. They were from the so-called Führer convoy, a top-secret fleet fulfilling missions. Details have remained a secret till now. The submarine crews were reluctant to cooperate. Even so, the Americans learned a few things. The commander of U-boat U-530 spoke of his involvement in an operation codenamed Valkyrie 2. 2 weeks before the war's end, the U-boat U-530 left the quay, heading for the shores of Antarctica. On board of the submarine were passengers with faces covered in bandages, as well as Third Reich relics. The commander of another U-boat, U-977, Heinz Schaffer, later testified that he followed the same route. It was found that German submarines repeatedly followed the Antarctic route. But why go there? In 1820, it was discovered by 2 Russian explorers, Yelenchmersen and Lazarev. Somebody else can pronounce that much better than I can. Since then, this mysterious continent, bigger than Europe, continues to attract explorers like a magnet. However, the 10-metre high sheer icy shores made the continent impregnable for many years. For almost a century, Antarctica remained unknown. Only coastlines were marked on the map. Suddenly, this distant and useless icy continent aroused a strange interest in the Germans. Large funds were allocated for Antarctic study. 2 research expeditions were arranged. This happened just before the war was due to start. In January 1939, 2 catapult-controlled airplanes, the Passat and Boreas, took off from the deck of the Schwabenland. They began patrolling Queen Maud Land, managed to secure for the Third Reich territory the size of Germany. New Swabia. In April 1939, the experienced polar explorer, Captain Alfred Richer, I've completed the mission entrusted to me by Air Marshal Goering. For the first time, German aircraft flew over the Antarctic continent. This unusual mission then passed to the Führer's Sea Wolves, the U-boats. Later, Karl Donitz let slip a strange phrase. My submariners have found a true paradise on Earth. In 1943, at the peak of the war with Russia, Grand Admiral, at the other end of the Earth, we've made an impregnable citadel for our Führer. Back then, the Grand Admiral of the German Naval Fleet's words. Today we can only hypothesize what the Grand Admiral meant. Recently, huge underground lakes were found a kilometre deep under the ice. The lake's temperature is 18 degrees Celsius. Located above the water's surface are dome-like vaults filled with warm air. It's possible that from these heated lakes, a constant river of warm water flows into the ocean. These warm rivers may have formed large underground ice tunnels, perfect for the construction of secret bases. From the ocean's edge, any submarine could easily pass under the coastal ice into the tunnels, immune from storms and polar cold. At the start of 1939, regular trips were made between Antarctica and Germany in a specially equipped and modified research vessel named the Swabia, but were shocked to find thousands of highly qualified Third Reich specialists had vanished and weren't listed as dead. Over 100 submarines had also vanished. The famous polar explorer and admiral of the US Navy, Richard Byrd, received the order to destroy the Nazi base in Antarctica. But things went wrong. The resistance met by the American squadron even now raises many questions. Admiral Byrd not only reported fighter jets with incredible capacities to Washington, he also discussed an attack on the expedition by strange flying saucers. They emerged from the water at high speed, causing heavy damage to the expedition. On February 26, 1947, a battle took place, which is described by a member of the expedition, an experienced pilot called John Syrison. They flew vertically out of the water in a fury, slipping between the masts of the ships with such speed that the air flow perturbed and dislodged the radio antenna. The two Corsair from the Casablanca were slain by some kind of mysterious ray, shot from the nose section of the flying saucers. They then dived into the water near the ships. At the time I was on the Casablanca's deck and saw it as you now see me. I didn't understand these objects were silent as they floated between ships. Like a satanic beast, spitting deadly fire. Suddenly I saw the destroyer, Murdoch, which was about 120 feet away. The flames flashed and it began to sink. Despite the danger, rescue teams and lifeboats were immediately dispatched. To the disaster site from other ships, the nightmare lasted about 20 minutes. When the saucers again dived under the water, we evaluated our losses. They were terrifying. Who did these flying saucers belong to? Could it have been Nazi Germany? After the war, in Nazi secret archives, intriguing photos and drawings were discovered. They proved that German scientists were actually engaged. At the time, nothing like this existed. Anna Nerby, when translated, means legacy of the ancestors. However, the Society's scope of interest was broader than ancient German history study. Nazi ideology was based on the theory that in the past there was a powerful Earth civilization with access to the secrets of the universe. Somewhere encrypted and scattered, this higher knowledge was preserved. Specifically, they were tasked with reviving the superhuman in Germany. It was tested for the first and last time on February the 14th, 1945, near Prague. The lift power was created by the silent flameless engine of Victor Schauberger. The lift power was created by the silent, again. Reports say the unpiloted disc reached a height of 15 kilometres, that's 15,000 metres, in 3 minutes, with a horizontal speed of 2,200 kilometres per hour. The developer of its main engine, Victor Schauberger, later recalled, the model tested in February 1945 was built in collaboration with world-class combustion engineer experts. It was Keitel who had the disc prototype blown up, depicting flying discs above an Antarctic base are an artist's fantasy. They were made to test parts of the disc prototype within certain parameters, or were part of presentations to the authorities for funding purposes. It's vital to credit the German scientists and engineers who achieved huge successes. The Third Reich's leap in science and technology wasn't accidental. Flying out of Antarctic waters in 1947. Regarding the sources that emerged from the water witnessed in the 1940s, and nowadays the recorded sightings of flights, of unidentified flying objects emerging from seas, oceans, lakes, etc. I am sure that in 1947 the Germans could not have had such technology, and neither could any country. But if the Germans did not attack the American expedition in 1947, who did? Emerging out of the water, shining saucers, spheres, cigar-like objects, with an analysis of ancient knowledge, brought incredible results. However, the defeat the Nazis suffered was not accidental. In the polar and surrounding areas are not unusual facts. Everywhere, unidentified flying objects are observed. Viktor Berezhnev, first-rank captain, veteran of Soviet Navy intelligence, as a commander in Soviet Navy intelligence. These unidentified flying objects don't only exist in the form of a glowing ball of some vague nature, but rather have a definite technological body. One particular case I am familiar with was where, over the islands of South Georgia, very strange flying objects were observed. Emerging from beneath the waters, fishermen saw an object, as it is shown here on these pictures. Despite the strong wind, the object remained static for a long time. Clearly, it wasn't a cloud. At night, this triangle not only shone, but lights were at the I go back to that. But lights, and then at the end of 1942, a lightly armed flying disc took to the air. It's alleged that before the war's end, 17 types of flying discs were made. The Germans wanted to use them as spying devices. The generals who took part in the Battle of Kursk, and two Soviet Union heroes I knew personally, a pilot and a tank commando, described to me what they saw, a disc hung in the sky during the Kursk battle. What was it? They did not know. Neither the Russians nor Germans recognized it. The saucer wasn't made by us, I assure you. Among these disc drawings and photos is a saucer identified as the Hornibu. Anna might be able to pronounce that for me. Data on the discs reads like science fiction. According to descriptions, they used an alternative source of energy, the so-called converter of Hans Kohler, which required no fossil fuel. It was even planned to take the Hanobu 3 disc type into space. Hard to believe, who knows? German photo seized by the Russians, 71 metres wide, is now hidden in Antarctica. Here's a trophy photo. If not in space, then at least the stratosphere. In the seized archives, another mysterious document was discovered. It was a blueprint for a huge 139-metre-long cigar-shaped ship called Andromeda, with hangars for 5 of the flying discs of the Hanobu 2 and Vril type, for the secret bases of the Third Reich, including the Antarctic. According to American intelligence, by the war's end, the Germans had 9 research enterprises developing and testing flying discs. Were successfully evacuated from Germany. The 9th was destroyed. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens recalls, were transported to Antarctica to the new place called New Swabia. At least one disc research company was transported to that location. The discs encountered in Antarctica in 1947 were probably not the same discs. Perhaps they were German discs flying on classical principles. Perhaps they were German discs flying on classical principles. This disc flew through the ship's rigging at such a speed it bent the radio antenna from its wash. Ones that had already been developed by the Third Reich.